Okay, so you're painting direct light, this hippo statue on the ground, and I remember it was tricky. You had to move quick because the light was moving on you.
Yeah.
But I could see here you're starting with a very simple value, three-value structure, and just blocking in shapes. I can see here you've almost picked like a black, white, and not quite black, like a 90% maybe or so.
Yeah, pretty dramatic. Yeah,
a pretty contrasty light. That's pretty different, right, than overcast and some of the other things we've done.
I think it's easier, when you're dealing with direct light. It's definitely easier to see the difference between light, middle value, and dark because it's very distinct. Transition. Of course, there's always transition, sort of gradation, but not as smooth as a diffuse lighting setup. And so there's a reason why a lot of the traditional painting classes you start with the spotlight. Whether it's a figure or a still life, a lot of times it starts with the direct lighting. And in ours, we started with the diffuse lighting. So in here, this is the first time we're doing direct light demo, and I'm really conscious of, especially in this kind of lighting setup, this three-value structure start is very helpful to me because you're really trying to make a distinct sort of a design, you're really kind of figuring out the design of how the value structure is working because it really influences your design of the composition quite a bit.
Yeah. I have a quick question. So when I look at it, it's interesting that the local color of the object has made you choose almost the hippo as overall light object versus the floor, which is also getting hit by light, but it's a little bit darker in value. But when I look at the shadows, you've picked this one dark value, whether it's the floor or the hippo. Can you talk about the value grouping of that and how you came to that decision?
So to me, it has a little bit of has a little to do with exposure. I think I'm exposing more on the light side so that I see more variations within light than the shadow. So that's why shadow side, whether it's the local color of the floor or the local colors of local color of hippo, it's in a similar range. If you have to divide into three, but then hippo's color and floor color, when it's lit, there's a subtle difference, and clearly hippo has a lighter tone to it. That it's bright. I picked a brighter color. Also, this is the early morning kind of lighting, so hippo's plane's hit by the light a little more than the floor surface that's facing up.
That's great. Also, I just want to go over one more time, like exactly what you said, which is a great thing about exposure, thinking about exposure, is actually the complexity or the simplicity of something you're looking at. So if you're exposing for the light side, letting it being a little more complex in its value relationships, so that in the shadow side it's a little more simplified, a little more kind of all-in-one value sort of thing. I think that's a great way to think about exposure as a tool, as a useful visual tool, a way to see the world.
And obviously, there's you could actually expose on both sides if you choose to, but oftentimes there's a danger of making everything equal, and you're not really making a decision to sort of drop off one side or the other side, and your composition gets too complicated, and then you no longer have distinct shape in a composition, and then everything becomes gray in a way, and that's something I personally would try to avoid.
I mean, one thing to stress too is that you have very few details here, but all those details are really important in terms of describing this form. Like the little button on his shirt, where his belt line is. Those are really things that you're using to really define what that form is. Because overall, when you squint, those are pretty delicate details that are sitting there on the form, but seem very important for kind of describing
Yeah, again, that's the fun part about like trying to force yourself to kind of use simple shapes and see how much you can tell with less. And these little small marks can really tell you what the form of the object is doing. And that's why it's very important to be conscious of, like if you're actually painting, you always want to be conscious of your strokes. So it's not like you're just noodling until you hit the jackpot. We really, at least the intent is to really know where you're going with before you start painting, before you start putting down your strokes. And that way your strokes have a purpose and it starts to look definitive and decisive. And I think that's what makes your painting juicy, because you like people having confidence, and oftentimes you make a mistake that way because you have to really kind of go bold. But it's okay if you make a mistake, you do it again.
Talk us through this. So it's, we've talked about direct lighting having hard cast shadows. You're starting to put, what was clearly a cast shadow, and now you're softening it out. Can you talk us through that?
Sure. Of course, in the direct light, the shadow is crisper. The light is very direct. It doesn't diffuse out as much, but still, there should be a contrast between shadows that are cast from different objects. So in this particular case, the hippo's distance to the floor versus window frame that's casting a shadow on the floor, window's distance to the floor should create a slight difference in terms of softness of the shadows, because the light actually still wraps around still tiny bit. But if you step back and squint at it, it's still a very sharp shadow. But compared to the shadow cast from the hippo, that's really close to the object is very close to the floor where the shadow is cast on. It's really crisp, so you can really see the contrast.
Yeah, it's such a great compositional tool to be able to tell somebody about the world that's outside this painting. I love we do it all the time in our paintings for film, where this kind of something off screen is casting a shadow, but because of the quality of light and using this softer cast shadow, you really get that feeling of distance between the object and what we're looking at. And I just think that's great, and it's really nice within this painting to have that contrast of shadows. And what are you painting right now? You're kind of starting to paint back into the shadow side.
So it's a bit of a bounce light. It's a very subtle thing, but the sunlight hitting on the floor, it's this diffuse light bouncing off of the floor, is casting onto the sort of under plane of hippo, of this hippo character. And that's one thing that's really distinct. You really want to make sure you get this illuminated environment, because the light is so strong. The only thing you want to be careful is that you don't blow out the entire shadow side of the hippo. That's something we sometimes make the mistake of. Okay, it's the sunlight, we have to bring a lot of bounce light, and then you forget about, wait a minute, you have to still have the contrast between light and shadow. And oftentimes we make this mistake of shadow getting too bright,
Sorry, that was my phone. Very unprofessional.
Very unprofessional.
Yeah, it's great actually that you're keeping the simplified value version off to the side there, because it's great to keep checking and how close you are still, how that overall value relationship is maintained. And what are you doing right now?
I think this is kind of I wanted to indicate a little bit of a floor pattern direction. So it's we have this wood flooring, and just the pattern of the floor going against the shadow direction I thought was really cool. But I didn't want to sort of paint it, so I kind of just used what I wanted to do was to use the adjustment layer, just darkening on top of everything I painted already. I had this similar, one of the first demos that I did, doing the the graphics on the mailbox, it's the same thing. You know, any surface detail, I always leave it at the end. So I just did the lighting of it. So the floor where it's lit, where it's shadowed, and then I introduced this floor pattern at the very end. And you know, with the adjustment layer, that makes it easy without losing your shadow and light and shadow paint, you know, the part that you painted already. Great. Cool. You told me to keep it simple and fast. That's why I didn't do a nice one. But
oh, it's nice. I didn't say it wasn't nice. I just wondering.
No,
I'm not. I'm just asking. You're so sensitive. Just asking.